There's 10 of you already here. You should be able to comment on YouTube. Welcome to the Income Evolution Training, my first live training since June of 2025. We're getting back into it. I don't know if you guys experienced what I was experiencing last year of just lifing. And I would love to know if you can see the comments okay. So just if any of you can comment when you figure that out on YouTube, let me know so I can kind of jump in. I'm going to share. I do have some slides today. And this training is really, hold on, you might hear some audio in the background. Let me pull up this video. Okay, there we go. I have YouTube pulled up in another tab so I can see what you're seeing. So I've been sharing a lot in the posts kind of talking about this training on how my finances have changed. Many of you know my story, which is that I was growing a coaching business since 2017 and also doing marketing services on the side. And I invested a lot to grow my business. And I had this mentality that, it, takes money to make money. And I just kept spending and spending. And a lot of limiting beliefs were introduced along the way that if I wasn't investing, I wasn't going to grow. A lot of the coaches I was working with were discouraging self-trust rather than encouraging it and teaching me self-leadership. And it got to the point where I was selling things that became unaligned over time, was selling things in a way that wasn't aligned, was spending more and more to make the same amount of money and eventually less, and didn't trust myself to make any kind of pivots or changes. And so in 2022, I had an almost $0 sales month in the summer. And it was really in April of 2022 when I realized that I just had to stop the bleeding on everything. I got into about $60,000 of debt within the course of a few months. And fast forward, now we're in 2026, January, I've paid off all of my interest debt besides my house, which will also be gone soon. I paid off all of that, and I was expecting to have to pay it off in 4 years or more. And my income has actually decreased a little bit since 2021 and 2022. So I want to kind of share it when I was in that moment, when I was in those moments, those years, feeling like I was never going to get to the end of making more money, saving for retirement, paying off debt, all these reasons why I started becoming ambitious in the first place. I had to stay with the vision a lot longer than I thought I would have to when I started making more money. So I want to talk about that process because it's not just about manifesting and energetics and law of attraction, but it was also very much about refining my strategy and figuring out the balance between alignment and good strategy. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I would love to know in the comments what attracted you guys to come today. So tell me what you're excited to learn about. And if you can't comment, then I don't know how to. I've done this before. People could comment, so I'm assuming you guys can comment fine. But let me know what you're excited to learn about today so that I can kind of contextualize what I'm teaching for everyone who's here. And I think with all that intro, we'll just kind of jump in. So I should be able to add this here. Here we go. My cutie patootie little slides. Welcome to Income Evolution. And I'm going to share with you guys today a 3-step framework to stabilize your income by aligning your strategy, expanding your capacity, and by implementing clean execution. So you're in the right place today if your income feels inconsistent or unpredictable, if you've tried doing more and just created more pressure for yourself, if you would like growth that feels more sustainable. And this is a system that you can return to regardless of the stage of business that you're in. And also my hope for this training is that it's a framework you can come back to when you feel off track, when you start feeling scattered again. This is what I've been doing over the course of the last 7 years, is coming back to this and refining this over and over again. So I'm going to tell you the mistakes, like why you keep wobbling, and then I'm going to go into the framework. So if you've heard my frameworks before, every time I teach a framework, I'm kind of building on it. So this is one of the most simple frameworks I've taught, but it's still very much related to the things you've heard me talking about for the last 4 years, and what's inside my book, Embodied Abundance. I'm going to help you know what to focus on now versus later, and then how to take action consistently. I took a break from coaching kind of unintentionally. I had my last coaching client in June of this year and didn't get a new client for at least, I think it was in December when I had a new client sign up. And in that time, really kind of figured out like what was aligned. So we're going to talk about like what I'm teaching today is like the same thing I've been going over with the latest 5 new coaching clients I have. It's like very, very simple. So your inconsistent income has nothing to do with your motivation. It has nothing to do with, I know, some people, I get a lot of clients who have ADHD or, other issues. And although like there are processes and systems that can help you perform better depending on your personality, in my experience, it's usually something else in addition to that. So it's usually a strategy that's not aligned. It's a lack of focus, or people who are very successful, they have a capacity problem. So they don't believe that they can hold money or receive it, or they've had success too fast, too soon, like I did, and their nervous system became dysregulated. And then lastly, a lot of people experience execution problems. So they're successful, or they've had some success, but it's hard to be consistent because they have too many things going on. So we're going to fix all 3 of these today. So the 3 mistakes I see people making, number 1 are strategy without capacity. So when I say capacity, tell me if you guys know what I mean when I say capacity. But when I mean capacity, I mean what you can and can't hold. So examples of this are adding offers before stabilizing your delivery. So a lot of people are trying to sell one thing, and then that thing isn't working, or it's not selling as well as they like, or they want it to sell faster. So they'll introduce something else, and then they'll introduce something else, and they'll introduce something else. And now they have 5 things that aren't selling well instead of one thing that's not selling well. A lot of people also try to market harder when they're already overwhelmed. In my experience, when people are overwhelmed and they're not getting the sales they want, there's usually a simpler way, which we're going to talk about in the first step of the framework. And then another thing I see people doing is copying strategies that are built for somebody else's nervous system and personality. So for some people, it is very much aligned to send cold direct messages. For other people, that's not aligned at all. For some people, it's very much aligned to create content like blogging or videos, but they would never send a DM. So really leaning into what feels good to your nervous system will help you simplify your marketing a lot. Mistake number 2 is taking action without structure. So random effort does not lead to predictable income. So some examples of this are posting when you're inspired and disappearing when you're tired. And that doesn't mean you have to be consistent either. It just means you have to realize what your personality is like. I feel like I'm relying on my slides too much, and I don't want to just read to you the whole time. So we'll see if I may stop sharing the slides if it's too much reading. So consistency can come from discipline, but in my experience, it's easier if consistency comes from design. So an example of this is I have a client who, I know that she struggles with taking consistent action over a long period of time. And so like another example going back to ADHD is you can become very bored doing the same things over and over again. So we design the marketing system around that. So rather than say, you're going to post on LinkedIn 3 times a week, we say, you're going to post on LinkedIn periodically every month, and then make sure that you reply to all your DMs every week or so. So we make the system more flexible to account for different energy levels. Launching without a repeatable process. So if you're relaunching things in a different way every single time, or if you're relying on adrenaline instead of systems. So even though as a manifesting generator, I have to do things differently a lot of the time. Like it's hard for me to do something the same way because I have to post from inspiration and share from inspiration. And I also have systems that support me, so I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. And then the other mistake I see people making is one-time fixes. So like you're solving the problem for today, but you're not leaning into what could this look like long-term? What's going to be a machine that works for me over and over again? So examples of this are you have one good month followed by panic. So like one of the clients that came to me recently, she has a $5,000 coaching package that she sells really well. But what happens that she sells it a whole bunch, and then she serves those clients and then forgets to market. And then she has the same kind of slow season every year. So we want to build a system around what is the minimum viable marketing you can do all year long so that you don't have as much of a slump when you're delivering to your clients. And then implementation without reviewing. I'm not going to read all of this. I'll send you guys the slides if you want. So with the framework today, there's three things I want you to lean into: having an anchor, and then cultivation and expansion. And this works again, whether you're at 3K months or even if you're starting out, although it's harder when you're starting out because you don't know what sells yet, but I'll talk more about that. So this works regardless of if you're, doing 7 figures or 6 figures. So the first step in the framework is anchoring in. I don't see any comments, so I'm just assuming you guys can hear me just fine because a bunch of you are still here live. I hope that the comments are working. I'm gonna change one thing on YouTube and see. Kind of pause here and let people catch up. Okay, so there's 3 steps to the framework today. The first one is anchor. So the first thing we have to do when I'm starting out with clients is, okay, good. Thank you, Heather. I just got like 10 comments. Okay, 4 comments. Okay, thank you. I don't know everyone's name, but I can see all your handles. Very good. Okay, and the slides are helpful. Okay, good. I'll keep the slides up. Okay, so the first thing I do when I'm working with clients is I want to figure out an anchor. And let me know if you have the minimalist marketing framework. Okay, good. I'm glad you like the slides. In the minimalist marketing framework, I talk about the anchor in more detail, but we want to create a grounded, reliable income floor, and not just an income floor, but also like what is the focus of the thing you're selling on and what is the main way that we're going to get in front of people and then sell it. So I'm not getting into all of those things today, but you want ideally a primary offer, a primary growth channel, and a primary conversion path. You've also heard me say this as like one main way to get awareness and one main way to nurture people. That's choosing a platform to gain the awareness and choosing a platform to nurture. So your conversion path is most likely going to involve email, and your growth channel is going to be very different for all of you depending on if you're on social media, if you're just using a blog, if you're just doing networking events, or a combination of those. But if nothing else worked this month, where would your money still come from? So this is the question I ask, this last statement. When I first start working with people, my first question is 2 things. Where's most of your income coming from? And then whether or not that's aligned or not, because there's a chance that they hate where that income source is. And then that's a whole other thing. But where is most of your money coming from? And how have you gotten sales in the past? Because I want to use the answer to those 2 questions to figure out what we're probably going to focus on, unless it's not aligned, and what we're probably going to lean into creating a system around to get more of. So however it is that you've gotten most of your sales, we want to try to create a system around that. So that's what this anchor step is like, we're going to figure out your focus, your anchor for your marketing, your anchor for your offer, and then create a system around that. Some of you are going to have a system that's automated, and some of you are going to have a system that we're just creating a process around. So an example of this is one of my clients gets most of her clients from teaching workshops. You can't necessarily automate every part of sending pitches, right? You can delegate a lot of that. You can create templates for it. But at the very least, even if we can't automate it, we want to create a system around it. So if we know that most of your clients come from workshops, then let's make a goal around how many workshops you're going to pitch per month, what's your maximum amount of workshops you're going to do, and what your client capacity is. So hopefully all this is making sense. When you don't have an anchor, you're second guessing what to focus on. You're adding new offers all the time. You're posting here and posting there, not really knowing what's working. Every new idea feels urgent. So it's like, oh, this new platform is here. I guess I need to post on that now. But basically, if you don't have an anchor, the other problem that you face is that your nervous system doesn't know where money is coming from or where it can come from. So not only do you have a kind of a nervous system embodiment problem, but you also have a practical, like if it's hard to build a belief if you can't believe in something, if there's nothing to put your belief in. When you do have an anchor, decisions get simpler and faster. So it made when I just choose one primary thing that I'm doing, just makes everything else so much easier. So if I say the primary way that I'm making my money right now is through fractional CMO services, I have 1 to 2 clients for that at a time. And then everything else I do is extra credit. It depends on what my focus is, which could change. But your income stabilizes enough for you to exhale. So like I've had 2 or 3 of my one-on-one clients recently who they're like, okay, I want to launch this thing or launch that thing or launch this thing. And I'm like, We can go all in on whatever you want. I will support you. What's aligned, you can trust yourself. And also, like if your goal is to stabilize your income and you're doing high ticket sales, I would say let's focus on the high ticket sales because we can really just get a couple of those a month for you to feel stable and safe. Then we can play with the other stuff. But then also when you focus on something and you stick with it and you start seeing results, then you start building more belief that your goals are possible. And then you can build momentum off of that belief. So important notes about this. If you're me and you want these reminders, these are reminders for me and for all of you, but you can change your primary offer. So when I'm telling you to choose an anchor, you can change these things. It's just important for you to stick with it long enough to measure. What I see too many people doing is they're trying 5 things at once and they're not really giving anything a fair shot. So focusing really helps you build your belief, build your competence, build your confidence. So at any given time, stick with one thing that's working for you, and this will simplify your growth so much. So I gave some examples of this already. I just put this slide here to remind me to talk to you about like, what does this look like when you're actually focusing on it? So my focus might change because I think I want to get more coaching clients now. I was going to give myself as I'm in too much transition to be an example for this, but I'll be an example for another one. Okay. Any questions? So I will have time today to coach, answer questions. I may not answer questions while I'm teaching through all of this, but I will have lots of time at the end. If anybody wants to be coached, I can either coach you in the comments and I can also bring you on stage to be coached live. So that is an option depending on, if anybody wants that. Okay, so number 2 is to cultivate. So we want to choose a focus. We want to start creating results with that focus. So this is very practical, grounded. Now we're getting into the mindset, embodiment, woo-woo part of this, which is we start building the abundance, which is practical, but it's also spiritual, esoteric. So this is where we start building abundance. You have to learn to manifest without bypassing reality. So if you know me, you know I'm not about like toxic positivity. Like we're grounded in reality. I'm not just going to tell you to sit at home and watch TV and think that money is coming to you. But we also, now that you have, so this is how it always works with coaching clients. Like a lot of people come to me because they want to make more money. And many people come to me because they want to heal their wealth wounds. But we always start with the what and the how. And then once we know the what and the how, it's not that we have to focus just on that strategy, but it's that once we're taking action, then the constrictions start to come up naturally. So then, somebody makes money and they're like, oh, I have a worthiness issue around receiving. Or somebody makes money and they're working with me as a coach and they want to hire another coach, or they want to hire an assistant when they've earned, I can tell when these wealth wounds start coming up. And so then, or they get on a sales call and they lower their price below what makes it feel worth it to them. So once you start having the focus and taking the action, then the constrictions around wealth wounds and manifesting and your beliefs, those just start to naturally arise. We can work on those before taking the practical action, but the practical action, it gives us, it's one of my coaches said this really well, which is like, there may be something in my personal life I have a problem with, but if it's not calling my attention, there's no need to work on it right now. So for example, I may want to lose 5 pounds, but if it's not stressing me out or causing me any problems, there's no reason to force that issue. But then if I go on a hike with friends and I can't keep up and that really bothers me, that might be the motivation that calls my attention to lose the 5 pounds. This is such a small arbitrary example that I'm hoping most of you are neutral about, but you don't have to work on something until it's a problem. So when we start working on things is when our attention is called to the things we need to pay attention to and work on. So lastly, the last bullet here, letting your income grow from alignment instead of urgency. So abundance is created by combining the strategy, which is the focus and choosing an anchor, with receiving abundance and then increasing your capacity to hold it. So this means regulating your nervous system and healing your wealth wounds. I'm going to talk more about that in a second. So when you don't cultivate, you're pushing, forcing, overworking to create results. Money can feel hard even when opportunities show up. Old patterns repeat: scarcity, avoidance, worthiness, fear. So when you find old patterns repeating, this is a clue that you are not cultivating, that you're not healing your wealth wounds, that you're not expanding your capacity to receive. When you are cultivating, your income starts flowing with less effort and more resistance. And that may not happen in 2 weeks, but it will happen in months and it will happen in years. And we can't rush this process, which is that's what we'll talk about in the third step a little bit, but you have to give it time. And if you've given it time and you're still facing these patterns, you may not be cultivating. So your abundance will grow because your nervous system can finally handle it, and because you're regulating your nervous system and aware of those responses. So this is where I feel like where I've had the most change is in this capacity building and sticking with things for the long term. So like I kind of touched on this already in the intro and in a lot of my social media posts marketing for this. But when I first started making money, 2019 was when I had my first 5-figure month. I still had a job at the time. So $14,000 in a month on top of my job's income was like a lot of money. And I joined a mastermind in November of 2019. And it was the first time I believed that I could actually make something, what I thought was crazy per month, like $30,000 a month. I never thought that was possible. And I was finally had a taste of that. And then 2020 happened, and that was a really good year for me. I did $260,000 in sales in 2020. And also, that was a really hard year, especially towards the end. It was a really good year, but 2021 started feeling sticky. And 2022 was super sticky because my income was dropping, my expenses were increasing, and what I was doing wasn't aligned anymore. And through all of that, I had to start healing my wealth wounds. I had to come back to my original vision. I had to believe that the vision was possible, even though I wasn't seeing the results yet. So when I was having 20, 30, 40, 50K months, I was okay spending a lot of money. And I think I could have done things differently that would have, I think I had some wealth wounds that were causing me to overspend. But I had to come back to the belief and the dreams that I wanted and release the timelines. So once I got into a whole bunch of debt and I couldn't force the growth anymore through investing and stuff, then I had to just sit and wait for the universe to hold me. Like I couldn't force the results anymore. And it really snuck up on me. Amanda Frances talks about this in her book. What is her book called? I'm sure many of you know Amanda Frances, but she talks about this a lot in her courses and in her book. But it seemed like her process of realizing that she could pay off her debt to paying off her debt happened overnight. And even though it took me 3 years, it kind of felt like it was overnight. It just really snuck up on me that all of a sudden one day I had enough in my business savings to pay off my debts. I had 3 different high interest debts that I consolidated into a lower interest situation because it was a nonprofit that I worked with. Anyway, then it was just crazy how all of a sudden it felt like overnight I'd paid off all of my high interest debt. The only debt I have now is 0% interest and then part of my house, and was maxing out my retirement account and had a budget and was saving more money and was figuring out what to do with that money. And part of what I wanted to manifest was having more money that I knew what to do with. And not that I'm, rich by a lot of I feel like in the online world, we get this skewed opinions of income. We think I'm not going to experience abundance unless I'm doing, $100,000 months. But I realized that for me, my life was so abundant while making still really good money, but less than I was making before. I just say all this to say it really snuck up on me, the abundance catching up, because my income was down and there wasn't all this. I wasn't marketing, have not been marketing very much. So I haven't been talking much about like, oh, I paid off this debt and I paid off this debt, because I had other personal life things going on too. And it just really snuck up on me. And now I'm like, I just remember the feeling of hope and excitement and even sometimes desperation around saving for retirement and paying off debt. And then when it actually started happening and then happened, it just was so much more calm and quiet than I thought it would be. And now I'm thinking, oh, well, I've achieved that first goal that felt like it was really far away. And then I thought I pushed it even further away by going into so much debt. And then it felt like it just kind of all dissolved. And I'm like, oh, now I'm returning to the the bigger visions I have. Um, and so, but I had to practice over and over again over the course of the last couple of years. Like I had to practice getting paid and then receiving that and looking at it and holding it. And a lot of times when I get paid, I'll keep the email like on read in my inbox so I can like look at it over and over again and just sit with it and be calm with it and know that I'm worthy of it. I don't have to do anything extra. And another wealth wound I've worked on a lot over the last couple of years is fear. Like, it's okay if I lose a client, I'll have another one. And especially since like more than half of my income in the last 2 years has always come from one person, one client. Whereas in the past, I'd have 10, 20, 30 clients at a time. Now I have a few small clients and then like more than half my income coming from one person. So it took a lot, when I was first going in the fractional CMO direction, I realized I can really only do one or two of these at a time. I, for a while, was finding all these backups. Like I was looking for clients before I even lost one because I was so afraid I was going to lose the first one. And my coach pointed out that I was operating from fear. She's like, you have savings, you paid off your debt, just enjoy that you have this client, know that you have a runway if you lose them, stop being afraid that you're going to lose them before you do. So I know I've kind of gone on a big tangent about this, but hopefully this is helpful. This is my biggest area of growth, is that like the abundance. Now I just receive it and I can hold it and I spend it, but I also save it. And I do all those things from a very regulated, grounded place. And so the last thing I'll say about all this is that my house, I'm going to get my half of the equity from my house in the next like month or so. I don't know exactly the timeline, but that'll be, 6 figures of cash that I get at one time, which I've never received before. The last time I got a lot of money at once was when I sold my blog. And that was, I don't know if I can say how much, but it was multiple 5 figures of income at one time. And because I didn't feel worthy of receiving that, I sabotaged that. So I didn't see that money for 2 months. And by the time I had that money, it had a job to do. So I never got to like really feel it and receive it. So when I have this money coming from my house, I'm just going to, like, I found myself journaling over the last few months on, it's going to go to this, and I'm going to buy this, and it'll go here and here and here. And I realized all those things could happen where I'm going to put the money, what I want to do with it. And it's okay for me to just hold that money for a little bit. The year of the horse is starting February 17th. It would probably be a good idea for me to wait for that big astrological, change before I go spending all that money or putting it somewhere. Okay, so I want to talk more about that because I think it's going to be a big part of something I can share. I remember, I've gone on a long enough tangent about all that. Okay, so the third step in the framework is expand. And you need to become the person who can hold more over time. So our first step in the framework is anchor. We have to choose a thing to focus on. Because most people need to find a way to make money in order to increase their belief that they're going to make money. And then in the second step, we talked about increasing your capacity. So you have to be able to receive that and heal your wealth wounds is really what we're talking about. And now we're going to scale. We're going to make even more money and you're going to continue to elevate to be the person you need to be. So for me, the hardest part, it wasn't taking action or healing the wealth wounds. It was learning the self-discipline to keep doing that over and over again. And that's the hardest part with manifesting in general, is that some of us could, like, sometimes you do manifest things right away. This happens to me with finding coins on the ground. Many of you know that that's a really important part of my story, and finding abundance and just feeling connected to God and the universe is finding coins in the ground. Almost always when I'm thinking, I haven't found a coin in a while, I want to find a coin today, I will find money on the ground. Like without fail. I can't think of a time that I didn't think that and then didn't find money on the ground on the next day or that same day or within minutes. But the hard part isn't when you don't, manifesting something immediately. It's like, oh yeah, I can get my belief around that. But it's when it takes a few years. It's when you have $60,000 of setbacks that you have to stick with healing your wealth wounds and staying with your original belief. That's when it gets challenging. You also have to reevaluate your anchor as you grow. And do that from a grounded place. That's why I don't work with coaches the same way that I used to, but I haven't really been without one. Like I have a coaching call today with someone I've done a few coaching calls with. I tend to buy them as needed, which is kind of how I'm coaching now, letting people buy coaching as needed. You have to strengthen your belief through lived evidence. And sometimes that evidence comes right away, and sometimes it takes a while. So you have to give yourself and the universe time. You have to increase your capacity to receive, to lead, to decide. You have to allow your identity to evolve alongside your income. So my identity is very different than it was in 2020. I could talk about that. I'm sure you can tell if you look at pictures of me from then versus pictures of me from now, just there's a different level of peace and detachment than I have now. Unfortunately, it makes me market inconsistently, but that works for me. And I've created systems around that. So expansion happens when who you are catches up to what you're calling in. And that can take time. It can take more time for some of us than others too. That's another thing about manifesting, is that some of us just have more barriers than others. And that's okay. Practical and energetic. So when you don't work on expanding, you quit or pivot, growth feels unsustainable, you outgrow old systems, and your identity lags behind your desire. When you do expand, which takes hard work, it takes self-accountability. That was the hardest part for me in doing the energetic work, was nobody's making me do it. On the practical work, on the strategy, it's like, well, if I don't have the strategy, I'm not going to make money. I can force things to some extent, but the energetic side takes a lot of self-accountability. And so examples of this are just refining your strategy, staying with the vision, and growing your ability to receive. So I feel like I've kind of talked about that in my own, in the way that I market today. I still have my email list, but I'm not doing the same kind of marketing I was doing in the past. I actually need to figure out what I want to do. I'm doing more networking events than I've ever done, which is only just 1 or 2 a month, but I used to only just do the internet, and now I'm actually talking to people in real life. But I've refined that strategy. I don't do a lot of social media. For me, social media is very much a checkbox. Social media is, I know that people might go look. People who find me through organic SEO want to make sure that I am alive and active and posting. So that's part of what that's for. But yeah, that's all I'll say about that. And let me know if you have questions about any of this, of course. So this framework works, like this anchor and capacity and expansion. This works because this, in my opinion, is what it looks like to combine. Oh, I'm not showing my little face because I keep covering the words up in the bottom left-hand corner. That's why I keep hiding this. Is this too big? That's probably, well, you can see that. I think you can see that. So this is important because, in my opinion, this combines the strategy, abundance, and nervous system regulation. So if you've read the Embodied Abundance book, or you've come to any of my past trainings, this is what I think was missing from what was taught to me, was how do you combine an aligned strategy? Because a lot of the coaches and masterminds I bought in the past, they taught a very specific thing. So you learned that specific thing and you went all in on it. But there was a point at which I couldn't force myself to do things I didn't want to do anymore. So I had to figure out what's an aligned strategy for me that I can take breaks from that still works for me. And then healing my wealth wounds. So I'd heard about manifesting, but I didn't know why manifesting wasn't working for me, or why I could manifest every now and then, but not all the time. And that's because I wasn't healing my wealth wounds. And manifesting requires you to feel what it's like to have what you want. But if you're afraid to feel, or if your feelings are very confusing and all over the place, then it's very hard to manifest consistently. So I think learning how to regulate your nervous system while learning how to feel and heal your wealth wounds is like a trauma-informed way to manifest. And the other thing about manifesting is, it just takes a lot of trust when you've got to wait a long time. Because luckily I was able to pay off debt and start maxing out my retirement in 5 years since starting the goal. But 1 year in, when I thought that was going to happen overnight, I was like, oh, I'm never going to get there. I just had to stay with the vision. So you have to start with the focus and belief, because there's you have to have a way to make money in order to believe that it can happen. And then you have to increase what you can hold. So deal with your wealth wounds, learn how to manifest. And then you have to do that over and over again and refine as you go. And that's what I feel like has become more grounded in my life in the last year. Was there's no like, what's the word for, it's just not loud, it's quiet. And I feel like that's what my hope for you is, that that's what your abundance becomes. I can see this happening with a client of mine who I worked with her for a while, and then we finished working together, and then she just rehired me for some things. And I can feel like when we first started working together, it's like, how do we do this? How do we do it? We're like figuring it out. And now we're talking, and she just seems so grounded. Like, oh, my program's almost sold out. I'm about to start having a pre-sell, coaching sessions for the next round. And it's not like grippy, emotional. It's just very grounded. That's what it feels like. So how to use this framework, when do you come back to this? So you're going to use this framework, whether we do it one-on-one or do it on your own. Like the first step is figuring out your anchor. And the next step is healing your wealth wounds. And I've got a blog post for each wealth wound on my website. So you can go through that. And then there's a quiz on my website where you can figure out what your wealth wound is, and then work on healing that wealth wound and work on manifesting. That's like the second step. So you can do all these things on your own, but you revisit your anchor, and you revisit, or you hire someone to help you, like through the wealth wounds or whatever, when you have income dips, when you feel scattered or overwhelmed, or when you're ready for the next level. And it's important to note, I have these bullets here on income dips. Income dips could be because of market changes. They may not be because you're failing in any area, but it could be because that who you are becoming and where you're heading has changed. So there was a time where all of my income came from coaching, and then it just, services all of a sudden, like the fractional CMO work, it just felt so much easier for me to sell. And at that time, I think I was preparing to go inward for a long period of time, and the services are asynchronous. So I didn't have to meet with people. I could stay in my pajamas more often, which you can do anyway, but I didn't have to be on video as often. So I think the services were helpful for me because I entered into a period of a year and a half, 2 years where I had to go inward. And now I have more capacity for coaching because I'm kind of coming out of the shell. But all that to say, my income was dipping because coaching was no longer aligned. And then when I figured out what was aligned, my income went back up. And that's because I re-swizzled what my anchor was. So you don't have to do this alone. Some people you guys can take this and implement it solo. We can talk more in the comments, or I can bring you on live. But a lot of you are going to want guidance, especially when it comes to like choosing the anchors and then starting to deal with the wealth wounds and your own personal manifesting process. But, I've always worked with a coach, and there's also been plenty of times where I figured out things on my own. But I am offering coaching. I want to tell you guys the new way that I'm doing this, because I've never seen anybody offer coaching like this before, and they'll have time for questions. So go ahead and start commenting things in the chat if you have anything, and if not, that's okay too. But Clarity Channel is the new one-on-one way that I'm working with people. And it's not a package with any kind of long-term commitment or big down payments. It's just unlimited private one-on-one access. You just pay by the hour for what you use, and I invoice you every month. You can use this for business. We can do marketing implementation together, meaning we can actually like build your website together, build your email marketing campaign together, do copywriting together. We can also do somatic healing work together. So we don't have to limit this to just business. Whatever comes up is on the table for us to work on. And what this looks like is it's a $99 monthly service fee. You can cancel anytime, and then just $250 an hour. And then usually I require $100 down and this gets applied to your first month, but that way I have like a little commitment when we're first starting. You only use this when you need it. And then I invoice at the beginning of every month, and it's due by the 15th of every month, but you can cancel anytime. And then for new clients who are signing on before February 17th, I'm waiving the $100 down payment. So just to be clear, I'm not giving you $100 off of coaching, or it's going to be less money for you to start upfront. So rather than starting for $199 upfront, you're just going to start for the $99 upfront. You can book your first coaching call, and then I'll invoice you hourly. So you can go to alicereeves.co/cc to get started. I don't currently have a limit on how many clients I'm taking, but have 5, and I'm thinking I'll cap around 15 or a max of 20. I'm going to see what that feels like. The only other urgency that might happen, like there's the deadline of the 17th, but I will be increasing the price sometime this year, but I'll probably do another promotion before that. So alistair.co/cc, you can sign up for the monthly service fee, and then it's just $2.50 an hour. The Year of the Horse, the reason why I wanted to do this with the Year of the Horse is because it's very much aligned with Clarity Channel and one-on-one coaching. This year is all about momentum and moving forward. It's about independence and self-trust, and then sustained, steady, embodied, grounded energy. So all these things we've been talking about are super relevant to the Year of the Horse. So just kind of ending here before I go into any kind of questions or support you guys want. Predictable income isn't about finding problems and fixing them. And it's certainly not about doing more or spending more, because neither of those things is sustainable. Of course, as you make more, you may want to spend more, like investing in support. But more predictable income and growing your income comes from focus and belief that what you're doing is going to work, expanding your capacity to receive, to make, have, hold, keep, spend money, and then doing that over and over again. Because that's the hardest part, is you've got to keep going and stay with the vision. You're allowed to build income that feels safe, spacious, reliable, and also make a shit ton of money too, but want to feel good, like it's always coming. So now we have time for questions and coaching, and I'll email out all this info too. But what do you guys need from here? There's always like a delay with audio. My nose is so itchy. I wonder if that's like a spiritual thing, because I feel like my nose gets itchy a lot when I teach workshops. Yes, so any questions, let me know, and then I'll give time for a lag, and then we can always just end. This was fun to put this presentation together. I haven't put together slides for myself in a long time. Been putting together lots of slides for other people. So question, you said that this isn't as useful for new biz because they don't know what sells, but do you have advice for how to find your anchor or how to know what to try first? Yes. And I have worked, just to be clear, I have worked with a lot of people who haven't sold anything yet, and then we figure out what sells and we grow it. But if you've never sold anything, then I'm going to ask you a lot about your interests. So let me pull this up like this. There we go. If you've never sold anything before, then I'm going to ask you about your interest and your personality. So generally speaking, there's like 2 main paths in, I'm going to say, entrepreneurship. And actually tell me, are you brick and mortar business or online? Because that will help me too. If you're online, which is like 70% of my clients have an online business, then you're probably going to be focused on high ticket something or other, or low ticket volume-based business. And if you have a high ticket path that feels aligned, I'm always going to push people that way, because you're going to make a bigger difference in your income in a shorter period of time. Whereas if you don't want to sell high ticket offer like services or coaching or consulting, with a volume-based business, you can't have a volume-based business without the volume. So you have to give it some time and then figure out the right systems. So you said online business. And so if you tell me, what are your ideas of things to sell? And that would kind of help me answer that question too. So if you're interested in doing high ticket, and that could be aligned for your personality to do coaching or services or consulting, what's other high ticket? It's like those are the main things, or coaching and services. Then I would start with doing market research. So Greg Faxon is someone who was a co-coach in his program, and he taught me he and I were in the same program together, and we did a challenge where we were just trying to get as many sales calls in 30 days as possible. And the benefit to that is that you're using those sales calls, you're literally saying on social media, I'm working with a coach, I'm trying to grow my business, and I need to talk to 30 people in 30 days. Will you help me? And on those calls, you're doing 3 things. You're You're asking a lot of questions to figure out the problems of your potential customer and the solutions that they need. You're also figuring out what you're interested in helping with. There might be problems where you start getting like really fired up and like, oh, I know how to help this person. I'm excited about this. And there might be problems that they're sharing where you're like, oh, that feels overwhelming. I don't want anything to do with that. And then the third thing you're doing on these market research calls, sales calls, is you're learning the language of the person. That's how you're going to sell your coaching and consulting. So if you're doing high ticket and you're new and you don't know what you're selling yet, I basically just recommend getting on a heck ton of conversations to do market research. And then usually you'll get your first couple sales that way as well. If you are online and you're doing a low ticket volume, then you're going to have to figure out loosely the niche that you're going to splatter for. And again, if you give me more information, I can kind of give you some context. But in those cases, I would recommend starting to build the audience a little bit before you try to sell. So with high ticket, you're kind of selling in order to build the audience. With low ticket, you've got to start building a little bit before you make anything because you've got to get some signals from the market. So hopefully that makes sense. But if you've never made any money before, and then if you've made $1 online, it's so much easier to make your next dollar, even if you're very far away from a full-time income. But it's like the first income that you earn just starts like there is just an explosion of belief happens, and you get your first signal from the market on what they might be interested in getting more of. So it's very helpful to get your first sale. But low ticket is usually you've got to do a little bit of market research or know exactly what you're getting into. And for a blogger, for example, that could be really difficult. Good question. Any other questions before we hang up today? Okay, very good. Well, thank you guys so much for showing up live. Again, alicereeves.co/cc. I'm waiving the $100 down for the next until February 17th, when the year of the horse begins. And so I'll email all this out, or you can go to alicereeves.co/cc. And I'm gonna cap how many one-on-one clients I take, but I just can't. I don't think I'm gonna reach that cap, so I'm not gonna create like false urgency around it. But I will email you if I get close to that cap, and I'll say I have 2 spots left or whatever. But okay, thank you guys so much for showing up today, and I will see you on the internet very soon. Okay, bye.